What's up guys, my name is Josh, welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be talking about the ever popular minor Royal Ghost Pekka Control deck. This deck is pretty insane right now. It has like an 80% win rate in grand challenges, which is insane. Usually like the highest you usually see on average in grand challenges is like 71%, so it's at 80% win rate right now, which is just insane. So you know I had to try the deck out, and I've got to say I love it, not just because I can win most games with it and because it's a good deck. I love how much control you have with the deck. So it has the Pekka, it has the Fly Machine, is the Miner, the Zappies, the Poison, the Royal Ghost, the Goblin Hut, and then the Zap to finish it off. And it's just it's so versatile. Like you don't even ever want to really use your Pekka unless you're facing like Golem or Giant or you know, Princes or all these kind of strong tanky cards. You don't actually need to use your Pekka that much. Really, you just want to get as many Goblin Huts down as you can. And you know, if you see, one of the best things to do is if you see your opponent use a Fireball or use a Poison on your Goblin Hut, then that means you're safe to go in with your Fly Machine and your Zappies, because they both die to Fireball. So the key thing about this deck is that there's 3 different cards of inside the deck that can be fireballed. So as soon as you see the opponent either fireball or poison one of them, you know that you're safe to go in with the other 2. And that's what makes this deck so good, is just because it's such a control based deck, and you know, it has the Miner in it to constantly get that chip damage as well. Just in case you can't get your Pekka to the tower, you know, you've got the Goblin Huts and the Miner to constantly chip away. And as you see on screen, I'm basically just kind of waiting for the opponent to kind of use his Fireball or use his Poison, and then that allows me to go in with the other 2 cards. And I just think for it's a 4.0 elixir deck, and that's usually quite high for something that doesn't have an elixir pump. Usually I won't ever run decks that high or that average in elixir. Usually my cutoff point would be like 3.6 or 3.8, maybe at a stretch, and then anything after 3.8 I would want to throw a pump in. But yeah, I think for 4.0 you'd be surprised at how quickly you can cycle the deck. And of course, if you're not using the Pekka, it really becomes more of a 3.4, 3.5 deck. And like I say, as long as you can keep getting those Goblin Huts down, and you know, constantly get that chip damage, and you've got the Miner in there, you know, you've got the Flying Machine, the Zappies, and then obviously, what makes it so good as well is it's such a good counter against 3 Musketeers, because you've got the Pekka for the 2 Musketeers, and then, or if you want to switch it and make it so the Pekka defends the 1 Musketeer, because you know that the opponent's always going to back up that push with other cards, so be it the Battle Ram or the Goblin Gang, and you know, all these other cards that they use to back up the 3 Musketeers. You can just use that. You can use the Pekka on that side, and then with the 2 Musketeers on their own, nobody really ever covers that side, or nobody ever really supports those Musketeers, because obviously that's 6 elixir, I guess, on that side. So you just use your Royal Ghost, and the Royal Ghost can take out 6 elixir, or the 2 Musketeers, which are worth 6 elixir, and he can take it out easily. You know, the only way he's dying is if the opponent zaps, but they're not going to waste, you know, they've spent 6 elixir on that push. They're not going to waste another 2 just to take care of the Royal Ghost. So basically, this deck is just insane against most matchups. You know, against Giant, it dominates. Against Golem, you can struggle against Golem but you just play it right. You know, because if they have the Night Witch behind the Golem, it can take the Pekka out relatively easy. You would be surprised how much damage a Night Witch does to a Pekka. But you know, you have so many support troops that can take care of a Night Witch, or can take care of a Baby Dragon, you know, the Flying Machine, the Zappies, the Royal Ghost. It's just, there's so many good cards inside the deck. And then of course the Goblin Hut, which, you know, even if you're playing Hog Rider, you know, they're playing a 2.6 Hog Rider deck and you've got a 4.0 Pekka deck. Not only do you have the Pekka to take care of the Hog, but you've got the Goblin Hut to pull it to the middle as well. You know, last case scenario. You don't want to always use your Goblin Huts for the Hog Rider, because you obviously want that consistent chip damage with the Goblin Hut, so you don't want it to always be taken out by Hog Riders. But you know, in a stretch or in a bad situation, you can use that Goblin Hut to draw the Hog Rider in. But obviously your main point of defense would either be the Royal Ghost and the Zappies, but that's 7 elixir, you know, depending on what they play, depending on if they play Ice Golem and Hog Rider. I would personally take that 1 elixir negative trade, because they have to then defend your troops coming back at them. But usually I would obviously just go for the Pekka if I have it, because obviously that's 7 elixir 2, and that shuts down the Hog in 2 hits, and the Hog Rider only gets 1 hit. So, and then you can support that Pekka, of course, or you've got the constant Goblin, the Spear Goblins coming out the hut, getting that constant chip damage. And you know, I see a lot of people use minion hordes to try and take a Pekka out on the bridge. Like they'll drop it right on top of the Pekka at the bridge, but then that's why the flying machine's so good, and that's why the constant goblins are so good, because you know, as they're coming out and they drop them, and the opponent drops that minion horde on top, you could just zap the minion horde, and then that flying machine combined with the spear goblins will take that minion horde out in no time, and you know, it barely gets any damage off. So yeah, I see a lot of people do that with the minion horde. I don't recommend doing that. You know, I'm gonna give you tips playing with this deck, but I'm also going to give you tips like how to defend this deck, because a lot of people are saying that it's undefendable and it beats pretty much every matchup. You know, I disagree with that. I feel like every deck with inside the game, you know, has a counter or not, you know, or has a bad matchup or a hard counter, and I think you can beat the deck for sure. Like if you have guards, if you have fireball, if you have a Pekka of your own, you know, Electro Wizard, all these kind of cards, super defensive cards, but good on the counter attack for the opponent. So if you wanted tips on how to defend against this deck, I would say if you're trying to run a hard counter, I would run Pekka, Fireball, Zap, guards, Electro Wizard, probably a Goblin Hut as well to counter their Goblin Hut. And then probably another support troop in there. I'm not really sure at the moment, but yeah, you can. There's definitely ways you can defend it. You know, a Pekka on Pekka matchup, especially if the opponent has the right cards to defend with. You know, as long as you have the fireball, that's what's key, I think, because a lot of people are using poison, but the key to beating this deck that has an 80% win rate right now, which again is insane. The key to beating it is you have to have a fireball cycle deck almost, because in a way, I guess the Expo cycle deck is a hard counter. Not a hard counter, but it can counter that deck really well, because you can set up with your Expo on defense and your Tesla, and then you always have the fireball for their flying machine or their Zappies or their Goblin Hut. And because it cycles so quick at 2.9, the Expo cycle deck, you can outcycle all of their support cards, and they can't really get a push off. And you know, as long as you use your Tesla correctly to defend the Pekka, or the Expo even defensively, and then set up on offense as well, I do think Expo Cycle can counter the deck pretty well. But yeah, there isn't. It's that good of a deck. I can't really think of any other decks that really do well against it. Maybe Hog Cycle as well, just because you can constantly get Hogs down. But the thing is, they've always got the Pekka, so it's tough. But going back to offense with the deck, I think one of your main pushes will be either Miner, Royal Ghost, and Flying Machine. That will be a good push, you know, with the Spear Goblins coming in from the hut as well. Or your main push that will absolutely get you a tower 100% would be Pekka, Flying Machine, and then Miner as well. Obviously, if the other person's running guards, it's always going to be tough for you, because they can always catch that Miner every time, or they can always catch the Pekka. Actually, I did face a hard matchup the other day, and it was guards, mini Pekka, Fireball, Mega Knight, and it was just insane because it had literally every single card you could imagine to be able to stop the deck. And it's funny because people say Supercell's matchmaking is rigged. I don't personally believe it is. Like, I think people will just use any excuse to kind of, you know, make themselves feel better about a loss. You know, it is what it is sometimes. Sometimes you get matched up hard against a hard counter, and it is what it is. But with this deck, there's like, to my knowledge, there's only probably one hard counter or two, you know, counters that can actually defeat the deck. But with an 80% win rate, I would seriously recommend checking this deck out. You know, if you don't have the Royal Ghost, you can always sub in perhaps a Knight, or you know, any basically 3 elixir kind of support troop you could sub in for the Royal Ghost if you don't have him. If your Flying Machine isn't up to level, I would say you could use a Musketeer, or perhaps a Wizard, or something that's maybe in the air that doesn't do damage. That does do damage. Sorry, like similar to the flying machine. Perhaps minions if you're running on a budget, or if you want to make the deck cheaper. But yeah, if you have all the cards, definitely try this deck out. It's amazing in grand challenges. I've not tried it on the ladder, so I'm not really sure how it is. But try the deck out. Let me know what you guys thought about the video in the comments down below. Give the video a thumbs up, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.